Good morning. It's Thursday. It's been a fast week, man. It's going quick. Welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike, and myself. I'm Mike. Welcome to
He
the.
sometimes talks about himself in third person.
I do that. It happens.
Already starting
Hi,
off
Mike.
quick.
I'm not sure what
Hi,
trigger. Something triggers it. I don't know what it is, but there's sometimes when I start talking about myself in third person. But anyways, welcome back to the podcast. We have some more conversation pieces around. So this topic around today is going to be kind of around adding the final touches to a report. What are the things that you use to polish? What does that look like, and what kind of techniques do you use? And with that, is there any intro openers? Do we have any announcemements or topics that are coming up?
And not a huge one, but this morning when I was scoping out LinkedIn and just checking things around, for some reason something must have happened, because there were a bunch of people that were doing polls on like what's the better overall power platform, Power BI or Tableau.
Interesting.
And like every single one I was checking, it was like 80,
Yep.
85, 15, like Power BI
Clearly
just
the winner,
crushing it, which was,
good. LinkedIn is owned by Microsoft, so for every
They got their bot.
mostly polluted.
for every 2 votes that come in for Power BI, they
Yeah.
delete 1 vote for LinkedIn or something like that.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, so yeah, really interesting. I've been seeing a lot of those polls. One thing I will observe observationally, I feel like everyone and their brother is using LinkedIn surveys at this point. There's just seems to be a ton of surveys happening just all over LinkedIn, just based on just my general observation. Scrolling through there's 100 of them, and I find myself rolling through and just being like, yes, no, yes, that's how I always do this. Never do that.
Got you.
Power BI, Tableau, no. Like just I'm going through and just like hitting like, and then I read the fine print a bit more, and it says the authors can see who voted for what. And then I was like, maybe I shouldn't be voting so fast for some of these things.
I have a PSA. If you're one of those people who do the polls, but you say, which one do you like? Do the like button for this, the love button for this, the clap button for this.
Yep.
Don't do that.
Yep.
I hate that. That's dumb.
Okay.
'Cause you're just trying to get likes on your post. You.
Okay, I agree with you, Tommy. But there's one that I really enjoy right now.
I hate all of them. Go ahead.
I agree. There's just one guy or a team of people. I don't know where that's coming from, but they're doing UX design, and they have UX design A or UX design B, and so you pick like the light bulb for one or the clap for the other or whatever. Okay.
I like the design one. I agree.
I like the design.
But that's a dirty trick.
It's a dirty trick, but I also enjoy looking at what the majority of people are actually voting for. So in those particular ones, I'll go in. I'll click on the icons and say, okay, which one did people prefer? Because that's kind of like an input mechanism for me as I build reports, thinking about, okay, which way of these people, like, again, slight changes on design UI experiences. However, this is where my problem comes in. The default icon is thumbs up. So if you are not paying attention and you just hit like, the default icon that appears is the, yep, good job, thumbs up. And so to me, if you're doing, this is where I think the inception moment happens for me, is you can't have the default icon be one of the options, because if you just smack the thumbs up and move on, you're basically waiting the decision to automatically go towards that one item. What you really should be doing is not having thumbs up, but you should have 2 other icons that are not the default ones, and making sure that people are intentionally trying to pick one of the 2 and not have any of the default items. Anyways.
Well, if you agree with Mike, hit our like button on YouTube. If you agree with me, also click the like button. That's the same thing. Good.
We'll do one of those for this week. That's awesome.
Yeah, I finally got the blog out too. That's the other little announcement, little tidbit.
That's a good. Great announcement there.
Go ahead.
Finally,
you should give
lean
a
into
synopsis.
Lean into it.
I think we're definitely doing the user group. We'll do a user group on it, but basically, we've talked about this before, where the Power BI scanner API that does the metadata of an entire tenant, which was previously never possible. And they made huge enhancements, even in the not just last 2 months, but I think just the last month, where you can append basically not only grabbing everything in your tenant, but also grabbing all the expressions in the metadata and the data sources. And they just added get user artifacts, so you can actually see who has access to what. So you get this whole picture of everything. And Ferry Bowman on LinkedIn. He had an amazing GitHub repo that basically put an Power Automate call to put everything together.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of took that and ran with it, added the extra metadata files. So now there's a GitHub repo. Go to the Power BI Tips blog. It's the latest post, but it basically do the prereq build with the app registration, add your variables to the flow, and just let it run once a day.
Let it rip.
Let it rip. We have a template file too, and it basically puts it all in a report for you, which it really helps seeing. Okay, what data sets are in the workspaces? Who has access? What data sources are there? It really helps from one, if you're an admin or trying to govern, are we using the right expressions? Hey, this data set doesn't have any explicit measures.
Yep.
Or is that explicit? Is the DAX expressions correct? Are we using the right measures across the board? And kind of being able to see like who's creating what as well. So it's pretty powerful, and I'm happy to finally have that out. So the full template's out there as well.
Tommy, I just want to say, as one of your millions of followers, I really appreciate you putting this together. In all seriousness, like the end to end on this, hugely helpful. I can't wait to dig into it myself and leverage this, because you putting all the pieces together and you basically made an easy button. So it's good stuff, man.
And also to Rui Romano too, who had a really nice template, because that's what I struggle with, was how do you actually display all this? So
exactly,
kind of took his idea. So no, it's something I personally, the reason I wrote it was I wanted something like this, and I look at this in my tenant probably every other day. Just to see what's going on. So
this is a good
wealth of information.
If you're looking at it every other day, this is one of these great opportunities. So if reports you can use that frequently, that's one of these great opportunities. Stick it out or design a page around it that's mobile based, right? So that's where you wake up in the morning. You don't have to go into the desktop. You don't have to go into Teams. You can just kind of hit it really quick and boom, there's your report. So things like that is what I look for when I talk about mobile things. Is hey, this is a report I look at every day. Well, maybe we can simplify it even more and drop in a couple KPIs on your mobile and see what it's doing. Awesome. Tommy, appreciate the readout on this one. And I think this actually bodes very well for a lot of the topics we've had previously. We talk a ton about governance, how to know what's being used, planning the life cycle of a report. It's got to be able to be created, and then you've got to be able to deprecate it too in the future. So I think this is a good way of being able to see or get a health meter on what's happening in your tenant and what are people actually using, what is being of value and what is not. So I think this is a great starter point. And I would also say, for those of you who are starting to figure out what's happening in your tenant or monitoring it, this is where you should start. Frankly, this should be the beginning portion of you getting into understanding who and what is being used in your tenant, because those people who are heavy users are probably people you want to pull into your center of excellence. You know, the reports are not being used. We got to figure out how to talk to those people, maybe turn them off, or figure out why they're not being used. Yeah,
it's not showing views like usage, so it's just really the metadata.
Just the metadata.
I will say, if you're looking at the blog for the first time, two things. One, make sure to read the Microsoft documentation set on the app registration step by step.
Yes,
there's a few things that you may not realize that will screw it up, that won't be able to call it. So
there is an admin setting that's in there that you need to flip for it to work with app registrations. So just be aware of that.
Especially with the Azure portal, just make sure to follow that step by step.
Awesome.
And then the other thing, I'm going to ask the community here, whoever looks at the template, enhance it. I know there's room for improvement there, so I would love to see what people could do with it too, with the data that's available.
So Mike, you posted this in the live stream chats and things, but for audio listeners at a later date, where this blog is available on the PowerBI.tips website,
and it's called using the Power BI Scanner API to manage tenants in the entire metadata.
Yep. If you go to the podcast description, the link will be in there for this.
Thanks, Tommy.
Cool. Yeah, we got
it. We got it covered.
Way ahead of me.
We got you covered.
Awesome. Well, so on to today's topic, final touches for report building. So let's kick it over to Seth. What are some there's a lot of reporting things that is going on in your environments, your world. What kind of things are you seeing, and where would you maybe kick things off with here? Is what do you see being in that final touches area? What would you call a final touch, and what kind of things are you doing on your reports?
Lots. I do want to say though that I think the original the lead up to this podcast was like enhancements to the final reports, and there was a typo in our internal thing which
Oh.
was little enchantments.
Oh,
And I was like,
yeah.
oh, dude, this is gonna be a
I'm on.
sweet podcast.
Yeah.
Little enchantments to visuals.
I
Like,
like
what
this.
are we doing?
Enchantments.
Bam.
You know, Wingarda Leviosa, you know.
Yeah, a little flavor.
We do a
It's like a
but
cooking show now.
who's the guy who does the salt on his arm? We can just do a little bit of salt on
Salt
our
Oh,
Bae.
guys, yeah.
to get the salt our reports a little bit there with the. That's awesome. Yes. So what
Yeah.
what enchantments do you
What
add to your reports?
enchantment, a little seasoning of here and there. It depends on where you guys want to go today. I mean, the two main areas that I think I've struggled with in the past, and mainly because I think as we start to finish up a report, I fight with this kind of overwhelming sense of like, man, one, I'm going to be done, right?
Mhm.
Especially if it's a big one.
Yep.
And two, like I'm really excited to share what I put together with the audience
Mhm.
or whoever I'm building the report for. And sometimes like that feeling of like, oh yeah, this is like it's done, like prematurely you're sending it out. And then a lot of the times like a mistake I've made is to do that, and your first meeting is like, well, yeah, but like if I click open the slicer, one of the things we asked for was to select multiple things, and I can only choose one. And you're just like, oh, and that's a quick, I can fix that. And then
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
first meeting is all of that little ticky tacky, like,
Yep.
well, yeah, it's just, but this one little thing, and you're like, oh, that's like 5 seconds, right? Like,
Yes.
so that's the type of thing that you can like totally avoid, because if you're presenting and showing that for the first time, it's like that's all the little stuff that I think we're talking about today is like, do you have technically your checklist? Like
Yep.
like one of the things I would 100% recommend coming out of this conversation or leading into it is whatever the topics we talk about, this is one of those areas where build a checklist. Like
Mhm.
back in the day when I was doing SQL DBA work, right? One of the best things I had was I had a really anal attentive boss, and like he was a checklist. He was an Excel guy, and every single step of the deployment from one environment to the next was laid out in this Excel document. And I will tell you what, I'm 100% sold me, because when you're getting into like the last legs
Mhm.
late at night, right? Having just the reference of not having to think about and remember all of the different pieces, whatever we talk about today, or if you don't have one, create your final sign off checklist of like, here's all the things I typically check before I do a report, and you'll save yourself a world of hurt and just like oh man, because that's what we're talking about is like the little tweaks, and or I suppose that could be bigger, because the two areas that I think we can focus on are, obviously data validation, like what are the different things we can check in there, and then
Yep.
visually, I
Yeah.
think is where a lot of the steps that I have to talk about today are resting.
Tommy, you got thoughts on this one?
Yeah,
No,
hopefully.
Tommy. The day you say
No, I'm good.
no, I'm good.
Yeah,
We're done.
I'm good. Mike, no.
Your turn, Mike.
I'm just gonna, yeah.
I concede the floor.
Yeah, right. I would say, yeah, there's a lot of things in terms of, I think not just the visual. I think there's also stuff from the back end that we can talk about too. But what the reason I think this makes such a difference is we always, when we're building reports, like we're very always focused on making sure we get the data right, the DAX measures, the model, the data looks right, and putting initially the visuals on the floor. I've talked about this multiple times where we do project report development in 2 phases. We do the sandbox phase and basically the actual development phase. And there's kind of a gap between, you're doing the sandbox, so you're just trying to test functionality. Do we have the right visuals?
Yeah.
So you're kind of spitting that and, on the visuals, having multiple things. I think what happens is, and what's so important is going back, and the little enhancements can make such a difference. And it's usually really hard for an author to understand what those things are, because you look at it every day and it just looks normal to you.
Sure. Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
So it's one of those, if you can take a step back and say, if I'm seeing this for the first time and I don't know what these metrics are, and I don't know how this flows, kind of what do I need to do, or what would I want to see so this makes sense to me?
Yep.
Kind of thing. And some of that's design theory, some of that's understanding the audience who's looking at it. But these are the types of things that, and again, like titles that make sense.
Yep.
Renaming,
not leaving the
yeah,
default titles,
Not the
Right,
default
yeah.
title.
sales by country, like
which includes all the tooltips.
yes,
Yeah, it's kind of
exactly.
thing.
Yes.
Or your little abbreviations.
Yep.
It's the little things that I think go like the ICBS or just design theory in general
Yep.
that just you wouldn't think about, again, because we're always in the weeds, but taking that step back, that's going to make such a big difference from someone understanding the data.
Mhm.
The CES point, I know we've said this scenario before where we build it and someone's like, I'm not sure I understand the sales year to date's blue here, but then on this other one it's green here.
Mhm.
And they're like, shouldn't those be the same? We're like, yeah, kind of thing.
Yep.
And it's those little things that you wouldn't think about, but make such a big difference.
I would agree with a lot of those comments. I think I'll give you one really practical thing that I've been doing recently. It's just been something, a technique or a style that I like picking up. So we talk a lot about like the Gestalt principles and how it helps to align your visuals and put them in a place where people can easily, by cleaning up the landscape a little bit, right? So one of them is making sure that things are grouped together appropriately. Alignment is a big thing for me. If visuals on the page are not aligned, I get really bent out of shape nowadays. So what a technique that I'm doing is I'll turn the entire background of the page like a gray color, and I'll make all the visuals kind of be a white background. And then what I'll do is I'll change the view perspective from not fit to width, but actually fit to actual size. And there's a reason I do that. Is because when I do that, I can use the shift key and the arrow keys to nudge the visuals over. For whatever reason, if you have the canvas of the report page zoomed in at all, you will have different jumps that the visual will do. For example, if I have fit to width turned on and I grab a visual and I use the shift left arrow key or shift right arrow key, it will jump like 10 pixels first, and then you'll do it again and it'll jump like 9.5 pixels, and then it'll jump like 9.5 pixels again, and then maybe it will jump. I don't know what the ratio is, but there's something with the scale of the page that makes it jump in odd increments. What I found, though, is if you go back to actual size, whenever you're jumping between pixels across the visuals on the page, it's automatically jumping 10 pixels every time. So it seems to be more consistent from that perspective. So I've turned my page all gray. I'll make all the visuals on the page, and then I'll basically put like a 10 pixel border between everything. So that means that's just one nudge with the shift key on all the visuals. So if I want visuals grouped together, I'll put them side by side and stack them so it looks like one large white box. If I want visuals to be part of a group or separated by like a gray line, then I'll just put the visual up next to the edge, use the red alignment indicators, and then I'll use shift up key or shift down key to then provide those spacings things. So if you watch me build reports on YouTube or when I've done some of these report build pieces, that's a technique that I use, and I love just using the shift keys and the arrow keys to be able to get these spacing things correct. And I feel like it's one layer above what I used to do. I used to just put a bunch of visuals on the page. I think it's nice to have like that distinction between there's a background with some information on it or color to it, and then the visuals are popping a bit more on top of it. And if I'm really spending some time or I want to really wow somebody, I'm thinking about adding some drop shadow elements to those things. Very, very subtle though, like not very bold. I mean, it's like almost barely there, and you get this kind of like interesting effect on the page that kind of just makes the page, for my opinion, easier to look at. So that's one of my very clear techniques that I use. Add a background color and then put visuals and align them correctly, or align them and arrange them in a format way.
Yeah, colors is just such a huge thing. And again, we've talked about most people struggle with the idea or the color theory that are report builders, but it's not only does it make a huge difference in it's an enchantment, but it's also, I think, imperative for the user because it can throw someone off.
Yeah, it totally can.
We usually think about colors as, oh, this will really make the report pop. And the design theory, report design theory first talks about don't add a lot of colors.
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
Which can be a struggle because
IBCS does not do that.
Yeah.
There's like, it's basically everything's gray and you have this like green or red kind of indication of like things are up or down comparatively to last year. They give you some key indicators there, but like, yeah, I threw your link in there. I think that's very much worthwhile communicating. I think
Yeah,
sometimes when we think about visuals or talk to visuals, right? We think, oh, we're
I
gonna
need to print
figure this
that
out
out.
from scratch.
Yeah.
Well, there's been a
Mhm.
lot of study around visuals and things that are out there, and so sometimes what you can go do is go study up a bit, go look at the IBCS standards, just look at how they're doing things, look at how they're conveying information or changes over time or other things as well, because it seems to add a little bit of a nice flavor to what's going on there. And again, you don't have to copy it exactly, but at least it can give you some ideas. I'm like, hey,
Yeah.
maybe I can incorporate this
Don't
a
do
bit.
this.
Maybe
Do
I
this.
shouldn't
Yeah.
do that. Maybe yeah.
Right.
And I would agree with you, Tommy, 100% on the colors. Colors is a
Yeah.
thing that really bothers me,
Yeah.
and particularly around when you add legends to things. And one thing I'm a super fan of is, again, polishing. Right, we're talking polishing things.
Yeah.
One thing I like polishing. I don't like having slicers on the page if I can help it. That's just something
Yeah. I
I
agree.
prefer to put to the filter pane on the side, or I like to build like a paired set of visuals, right? So if I have 3 or 4 items, those are my categories. I typically like to turn those into a single bar chart. So I can show
And
the
a lot of people
categories,
do.
I can show there's 4 items, and then I can turn on the legend. So I add the column twice, basically the column once for the y-axis labels, and then I add the column again to the legend. And what that does is it technically creates a rainbow chart, and that's what Microsoft I think internally calls it, right? So each bar on the chart is a different color. Then I turn off the legend itself because the bar is the color of the
I agree.
item, and then I pair that visual with another visual, like a line chart, where I'm using the same legend category. Let's call it country, right? So now I have 2 charts where the colors match between the visuals, and then when I click on the bar for, Copenhagen, or that's not a country, but let's go Denmark. When I click on the bar for Denmark, that highlights the line or the sales data for just the Denmark country. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And then what I try to do on a page is once we've defined country as an array of colors, we're done. Like you can't go
Mhm.
add more things on the page that have more arrays of colors, because now you're conflating that color. If that color meant Denmark,
Mhm.
if you have that same color somewhere else, well, does that mean does the unit sales now mean that's the unit sales for Denmark
Right.
or not? So then I'm thinking about, like, I'm being very intentional about my color palette, and then saying, okay, well, since I've already used the array of colors, now I need to think about either a color gradient or something that's just gray, or picking something that's more neutral that I can
That's
just
what.
go into that
Yeah.
as well.
These are all really good points. I think the overriding thought here, and why I think visually you want to take these steps for sure when you're doing final touches on your report is, even if you're not picking it up, the person who's seen the report for the first time is
Mhm.
cognitively picking up, especially
Yes.
some of the misalignment. That's also one of
Oh,
my biggest pet peeves.
yes.
Like, you can look at a report and just
Mhm.
go, something's not right here, and literally it'll be a pixel off, and people will pick up on that. I think the color thing is also a huge thing to pay attention to, because you can have too many colors. And I think another point to make in here is paying attention to whether or not any of those different colors are going to conflict with people who have color perception problems, right?
Mhm.
Especially if you're trying to make a point with some of, like, red green.
Yep.
Can you do a bold color that isn't those, because we
Yep.
know that's such a huge issue with a lot of people not being able to decipher between the
And
two.
it's Christmas. Like, it's already has
It is Christmas, right?
Right.
Yeah.
too much red and green all over the page makes it look like, oh my gosh, we're just. I mean, and they can
Yeah.
be so
So
like red and green can be so bold in general by themselves.
Right.
yeah.
So like it can be like, wow, these
So
are just
a
really
really
red, really green.
a really good way that I've found, and at first when I heard this, I thought it was kind of silly, but it works.
It does work.
Get up from your desk
Mhm.
and walk backwards and look at your
Mhm.
report from a distance, so you don't see the data or anything.
Yep.
and and kind of try to wipe from your mind that you're the author, or look at it in a new lens. But that distance between you and the screen all of a sudden allows you to pick up things that you might not have noticed before, because you've been spending so much time in the report that you get sucked into just getting used to it,
Yep.
and you're fine with it. And that's what you're trying to break at the final stage visually, is you're not fine with any of it, right? You want to, like, re-look at, do I have these problems? Do I have too many colors? Do I have out of alignment thing? um the other point I was going to make is, do your fonts match? Right. This is
Oh,
a huge one because
yep. This is
one of
another
the
good one.
default fonts in the visuals
Yep.
for some of the inside XY axes is a different font, right? So if you select Arial, like you're defaulting to the wrong font, that show me the legend inside the X and Y axis is going to be this obscure, weird, I don't even know why they still have it, but it's a different font. So
Mm-hmm.
make sure things align, or they're at least the fonts that you want in the different positions on the page. And then one I've found is hilarious is if you are adding more things to your report for visually, for sure you need a checklist, because if you're not using a theme,
Yep.
plug for themes, go out to Power BI tips themes and create one, and then you won't have these problems.
Themes.powerbi.tips, yes.
But like the outline on an object, I
Yep.
can't tell you how many reports I've popped open, and it's
Oh,
like, yeah, it's great that you have like
yes.
10 out of the 12 outlined, but you don't have these two outlined,
Yeah.
right? Like, what are all of those little properties that you're tweaking on every object, and did you tweak them all on every object? The other thing that is, I think, overlooked, and I would probably have reversed the default, is the header, right? Like, a header does not and should not pop up on every object for an end user. If it's a button, they don't need to see like the 3 buttons go ...
Oh,
And you
yeah.
have to manually disable headers on those objects so that they behave like you would expect them to, especially if it's a button or something.
And
So
yeah,
you can really remove a lot of confusion from end users by toggling off or only selecting the parts of the header that you would want to. And for those users that might not be familiar with what I'm talking about, if you hover over an object, you get an ellipsis, you get, if it's a matrix, you get the options of drilling down and up, all of those different things, as well as being able to export. And if you don't want people to export, a good way is to turn that header off. But manipulating that header on the objects where you would want people to download or interact with or explode or just leave, you can remove that as well. Buttons is the big one for me.
Is that available in a theme visual, like in creating a custom theme?
Yes, you can turn. I don't think I have all the properties of theme stuff, but you can turn off the high level. Turn off. So
you can turn tooltips off, or I mean,
the whole header bar. Yep. So what I would recommend is, in this case, I would say, Alex Powers is online. He's not about the cells. Is don't over disable all the headers. But I would argue this. I think you should start with everything disabled, and you should turn on where it makes sense. Because I think in the report portion of this, right, tables make sense for exporting. Some of the bar charts and line charts may also make sense for exporting. But if you have KPI cards, if you have other visual elements on the page, there's no reason to have an export button for a KPI card. You're not going to export one data point. And if you are, it's fine, but like make that the exception and not the rule. So I think I like to govern the export data feature by what are the exceptions to not having it on everywhere. So I typically would like turn that off and then allow users to download or access that toolbar when they need it and turn it on when necessary. So I like the opposite of that. I don't like it on by default.
Yes. I think another thing that I can get neglected, but is, you would call it a final touch, but I think it's just part of that imperativeness is we're always focused on building the visuals. How does everything align? Does the story make sense? But tooltips and your naming is so important. And this includes too, not just your titles, because I think when we think of our naming, we think of titles, but it's also adding in, because you can change what a metric name displays per visual. If you double click, if you add something to a visual and then you double click when it's enabled there, you can actually change the name. So sometimes that may make sense. Also adding tooltips, make tooltips that help provide context. If you have a year-to-date bar chart, let's say, what would be super helpful to see the previous year and the year-over-year variance. Well, rather than adding 3 visuals or a bar chart that has all 3 in it, someone can hover over and see that percentage. So things like that are huge because it helps providing that context, because you can't put everything in a report. You can also, in the same vein, add additional tooltips that are going to give that context as well. But I really think the naming of your titles, or how basically your labels, your legend, having those names, making sure they make sense is such an important part, because you can throw someone completely off if you have a name that makes sense to you. You made it a little abbreviation, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
and like, I don't know what this means. Also, for any report too, if you don't have what you could call a reference page, especially if it's a new user looking at this. If I wanted to know what these four let's say submetrics were, how would I go about learning what that is? Like, what does that contain? Because it's maybe pre-filtered or is in a calculation. So adding the ability for someone to have a reference so you can explain everything clearly,
Mm-hmm.
giving context is such an important part of your final touch before it's kind of rolled out to production.
I agree with that 100%. That's a really good point. And I think, man, there's just so much to unpack there too. I'm literally trying to like write down all the bullet points of everyone saying things, so we can have a list of things here later on.
Yeah. Speaking visually, right? To continue on with that, and that's a really good add-on to simplify, right? What you
Yep.
have on the page. I think one of the other make sure you haves as far as enhancing or tweaking and final touching a report is adding either help icons or a help page, right? Because a lot of the time we certainly take for granted the amount of information that we can combine and put together in a report that provides context, or I should say in the report. What we need to convey a lot of the times is the context to the end user. Like, what are the base questions and answers
Yep.
that we are trying to solve for in this report? Because
Right.
unlike a raw data dump where you have to go figure things out for yourself, typically we're designing things in such a way to solve problems within this report. And I think with a lot of end users that we're still having to do, right,
Yes.
is show them that they can solve their problems in these reports, as opposed to going through your hour-long exercise and dumping something out into Excel where you go and do this all yourself.
Right.
So I think the report tab, right, where you're, or help icon where you're explaining metrics, or even the overall understanding of like what this report should do, really addresses a lot of the questions that automatically come up out of a report. Like, what is it doing? What is this calculation? Tommy, to your point of like, I'm in a different business unit. What does sales mean? And then ancillarily, oh man, it's the first morning brain fart in the world. Like, boom, gone. Take it away, guys. Lost the thought. Midstream.
Exactly.
To completely pivot, I guess. One thing I think is also, I don't want to say neglected, but we're talking a lot about the visuals.
Yep.
But part of the checklist too should be testing the functionality. And what I mean by that is, I don't know how many of you guys have built the report, looks good, and then you've done something like, well, that's dumb, the reason it does that. I always check selecting a visual and the inter filter ability, and making sure everything makes sense. So like, if I select this bar chart or this data point, what does the report look like? And sometimes you didn't realize, but you're like, it doesn't help at all, because either something disappears or everything's now just one bar chart. So I try to solve for that too, because I want, when a user selects something, because I want to push people to be able to interact with the data.
Yep.
But I also want that to really make sense for them so they can go, wow. But I'll always test, like, what if I clicked here? What would happen? If I clicked on this, what would happen? And testing those little intricacies that you may not be aware.
Yes.
And just trying, so the little functionality items, I always want to make sure make sense.
I'm gonna add to that one a little bit, because I think there's another part to that too, is like, if you build any sort of navigation elements in the report, this is another one where I think you instead of using the tabs on the bottom of the report page, as I'm building the report, I'm trying to use the control click button on the various buttons to navigate the report. So to your point, Tommy, if you have like the question block, Tommy, my words are this morning are awesome. If I have a question mark icon at the top or an information button that's there, and I want a window to pop up to say, here's what this report is trying to tell you, right? I'm on part of that checklist. Again, this dovetails very well in the checklist. Is part of the checklist is click all the things that were made by buttons or bookmarks that you can then go through one at a time and say, I'm going to click this page, so I'll literally go through and click page, make sure all the pages are right. And in some cases, you'll go through the report build and you'll accidentally turn on you've had something filtered on the page or the visual level that's not supposed to be there. You publish the report and people get the report and like, it's blank. I don't understand. Oh, that's right, because I already pre-filtered the page or the visual or something on there to have filters on it. So that's another one I would check is go look at all your filters to make sure that what is supposed to be filtered is filtered, but then physically use your page built navigation to also walk through the report. Hit the links. There's no we don't have a way of like scripting this, like, so we can't like record ourselves clicking to the report to have like a step-by-step process to make sure that everything gets clicked the way it should be and it looks right. We don't have that yet.
Yeah, when you deploy the report, play with your report.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
So especially if you don't want to, like in the PBIX file, in order to click a button, you have to hold Control, and you're clicking around on the different objects that are popping up. But if you deploy it and then you play with the deployed report, verify that everything is working as you would expect. That's a huge one. Yeah. The other large area, right, that we haven't talked about, which is just as important, to if not more, right, is the data. Right.
We don't worry about that. It's just good.
valid.
If you make it look pretty, people will just be like, "Oh, it's amazing. It's a great report." Move on.
There's nothing that says great report with people who don't trust your data. The top things. One, Mike, you're a huge proponent.
Yeah, I'm a component.
You're a component of the cycle.
Man, this is a solid podcast today.
Enchantments and components.
Rami, what does Rami think?
Oh my gosh.
Even in report development, to build calculations is the simple table. In the same way, it's also a great way to validate your calculations, right? Like open up a separate page that you hide right away.
Yeah.
Choose a single, customer, product, person, whatever the case may be. So you have a simple, straightforward line item that you can validate that the calculations you have in your report are working as you would expect.
Yeah.
Now, that double checking in the report, I think, also should be extended into an area that I don't think many people do. If there are other places in your application or in your business where this raw data is surfacing up to customers, your end user, you can guarantee that one of them is going to be like, well, you're telling me this number. How are you coming up with that? I'm going to go look in my SharePoint list. Hey, that's a nod to you, Mike. Like where is that raw data coming from? You're calculating that. Can you draw that back into the other source system and then validate that what is coming through your ETL pipe, what your transformation and what you're showing in the report is matching? Because that is a critical step in validating that what we built is the thing that is actually accurate based on what the rest of the customers are going to see.
And to note on that one,
report in your organization. Yeah.
To note on that, I put all my enchantments in SharePoint. Just FYI.
SharePoint is an enchantment.
That's good.
So one last, I guess, tidbit, and then I want to ask you guys a question. I think people also don't utilize the filter pane as much. I always try to make sure, like, using the filters on this page, I'm adding in the right things. And also to the interactivity of, I get this a lot from people, or I used to, is, hey, I selected this campaign, but when I try to do another filter, like, it's showing me everything, and I just want to see only that subset.
Yes.
Right. So like so understanding how the hierarchy works. So like maybe you do a filter on the entire report.
Yep.
And then you add filters that make sense based on if someone chose the entire report to help them out. But adding those additional filters on the page, because sometimes I hate the filters on the visual. Sometimes I use it, but I wish I could just quickly drag and drop those to the page level.
Yep. Exactly.
Because that could really screw someone up. But
agreed there.
I think, utilizing that functionality. We're talking all about obviously adding on to your report. But I know this is also a common problem too, is when does it become too much? We're doing all, like, is there ever a time with everything we're talking about that you should do that in every single visual, every single time? Or is there sometimes you need to take a step back, be a little more simple?
I think it depends on how far, so I think the progression of how many things you're changing and what you're changing over time needs to start to slow down as you get closer to final production report, right? So you're building a report, you're going crazy, lots of visuals are showing up, you're building bookmarks, you're doing all the things, right? You should have a very rigorous testing pattern, I think, at the very beginning, because That's when you're going to be making these little mistakes, right? I'm going to forget to unfilter the pane, the filter pane. I'm going to forget to, these things don't align correctly. We don't have the colors correct, right? You're kind of just going quick initially. So I think in the beginning, you're being more diligent around the initial structure of the report. I think some of these other suggestions around turning the headers on and off, like at some point in time, you've kind of checked these things a couple times, and maybe it's still on your checklist to make sure that it's correct, because you may add a new visual and forget to turn off the header bar that you should have turned off.
Mm-hmm.
But I think as you get closer and closer to like a final product, I'm really a big subscriber of get something in front of people first to react to it, because I think one of my challenges is people don't know what they want until they see it. Some people can do that. Some people can visualize, I need it to look like this, and they're very good at articulating what they want. I would say the majority of people kind of know what they want, but they need a little bit more guidance of like, I need to see what it actually looks like. I need to see how it interacts. And then explaining like, here are these visuals and here are the insights I'm trying to derive with these visuals. Usually there's more feedback. So it's kind of a balancing act, right? It needs to be clean enough that you can start reviewing with people. I like that agile process of here's what I've got so far. What do you think? And kind of refining that idea, because the more you can get engagement earlier on in that process around here's kind of where we're at, here's how we're building it, the more you can kind of cater and design that report so it actually meets the objective that you want at the end of the report build.
I agree with that, and I also think like I think that's not part of this process, right? Like that's in when I'm developing the report page and how do I want to represent the data, and those can be cyclical to Mike's point, right?
Yeah.
You go through a cycle, and as part of the end of the first cycle, right? We're doing add the final touches to the report before we present it the first time. And we're going to do that again. Like you make a bunch of modifications. Tommy, to your point, you simplify some things or reduce redundancy. Am I producing the same metric in a pie chart and a bar chart, right? Like is it the same thing? And I don't need to do that, right? Those are, I think, back to the process of choosing the right visual. Am I communicating the data correctly? Is it looking good, et cetera, et cetera.
One thing I just thought that once we really set up our center of excellence with the data champions is utilize people who haven't been part of the build but are familiar with Power BI, where show them a report and basically say, tell me what it means, and have them in a sense interact with it.
You've outed your wife before because you go to your wife and be like, hey, look at this. Does it even make sense at all? Like this, it's not even your domain.
Colors. I'm like, well, those are our themes. So
yeah, exactly.
Those are our company colors.
We can't change those.
Yeah. So I'll get some odd feedback there, kind of things like, why did you do a bar chart there? I'm like, I didn't ask you about that. Hold on. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I need to rethink my reporting here.
Yeah. But I mean, asking someone who's kind of aware of that data but hasn't seen the build, because even someone who's been part of that sandbox or the stakeholder, they kind of understand the idea of it. But asking someone, tell me what it means, try to interact with it. Does it make sense? And then that I think can help either with adding enhancements, or maybe you've added too many titles and labels. Maybe it's almost too much information on the front side.
Exactly. Another one polishing thing I'll put in here that Steve Campbell has used on a number of reports, or I think I find value from this as well. You can actually take a Excel file, and so there's concept of Analyze in Excel. So you can go to a data model and you can go get an Excel file and pre-connect that Excel file. In certain areas, what is helpful to users, and particularly in the reports, is sometimes you actually need them to get to the data, right? So sometimes I would rather have you just go right to the Analyze in Excel connection as opposed to trying to export in the report. Yeah. So what Steve did in his tutorial was he pre-builds basically an Analyze in Excel report with a pivot table or two in it that he thinks people may want to consume. And we had this on a client that we also worked with once, that they loved Excel. They needed all the data there, but they also wanted this high-level Power BI report on top of the data model as well. So inside the report, he made a button that had a link that would take you to the SharePoint download location for the Excel file. Super great solution, because then you could actually, in the Power BI report, give people a pre-built Analyze in Excel file that they would hit a link to. It would then download to their machine, and boom, here's 5 pages of similar tables that were already in the report. And now you can just start interacting with Excel data connected to the live data set connection. Now, granted, this all there's some setup it requires here. Like you have to make sure those people are available and can have build permissions on the data set and stuff like that as well. But like really cool solution And also, again, it's that repeatable work. It's that repeatable effort, right? If we know people are going to want to get down to the Excel sheet level, why not pre-build some stuff for them? Why not get it ready to go, right? If everyone's going to go to see that same lens of the information, build it in a way that makes sense, that works, give that to your team, and then let your sales team kind of go there and say, okay, I've played with the report enough. Boom, hit the download Excel button. All right, great. Now we're connected to the data. I can enhance it how I want as on, in addition to whatever the model's doing.
The first row of every Excel tab is, this is what you wanted.
Yeah, exactly. This is what you needed. You asked for it. Yes, there's not only an export to Excel, but it's better than that. We have a new button called Analyze and Excel, and that's even better than export to Excel. Awesome. Any other kind of tidbits or tips or tricks? There's I've been writing as fast as I can to capture all these, because this could be easily a blog post by itself of just here's some things you would want to check.
We'll make a checklist. How about that?
A mini checklist. Yeah, I think that would be good.
Who's up for a blog now?
I think I'm
I think Seth is up for a blog. I believe that's mine.
Shoot that my way, Mike.
Send me your notes when you're done, please.
I just copy paste. Last thing, kind of on the back end too, I think for the report author too, is again, think about collaboration, and think about that you're going to have to go back to this report at another time.
Yeah.
I would say little things like adding display folders or in your tables to kind of group organize your measures.
Yep.
Make sure your measures make sense. Add comments to DAX measures.
I'm doing commenting more. So I'm gonna jump in there. That's a really good point. I'm commenting more and more now than I ever have before. I feel like the documentation of the model. So to your point, Tommy, polishing. This is polishing the data model side, not the report side so much. But like adding simple descriptions to tables is very helpful. Adding simple descriptions to measures is very helpful. And I'm trying to slow down my development speed on, because I can just crank out measures like crazy, and I can just make a bunch of things. But I'm getting to the point now where I don't need to be doing a lot of testing in measures. I know what measures I need to build, and so I'm trying to take a little extra time around, okay, I've made this measure, what does this measure say it's going to do? And just adding a little blurb. This is counting the sum of the sales columns. Just even something a bit simple, because there are tools that can go into your data models and rip out all that information about it. Like, this is the sales table. This is coming from our data lake in the gold layer, and it blends this and this data together. Just a simple description around things.
Is there a script? I use script to extract comments.
Oh yeah,
it's part of DAX Studio.
DAX Studio will dump all that for you.
The comments in a DAX measure.
This is the #1 time saver for documentation.
What?
Yes.
Wait, we just changed Tommy's world here.
If you add descriptions,
descriptions,
into the model, right?
Yes.
Like you can peel them out with the measures.
No, I'm saying if you add a comment within the DAX measure, you can extract that.
There is a description field. There's a description field.
The description field's different from a comment within the DAX measure.
I'm not talking about comments. I'm talking about make your comment a part of the description. Like that's what you're describing. Okay. Yeah. And then you can go get all the descriptions of all the measures. That's part of the definition of what that measure is.
What I'm saying is there any way that you can extract the comment out of a DAX measure?
Comment? I don't even know what you're saying.
You can comment in a DAX measure, the 2 slashes.
No.
Does that not?
So you're talking about in the green text that appears inside the DAX measure. So you're documenting the measure,
which is called a comment.
Commenting the line of code.
Here we go.
Yeah, I thought you meant like there's another. I'm talking about like the feature set of like a measure. No.
Yeah, how in the measure.
So I would say, so you would have to write a custom tabular editor script to go read the commented sections or the commented lines of code, because there actually is very robust find and replace or find patterns inside the commenting. So if you use // that will most likely be a commented section. And then you have to read basically the commenting to the end of the line to see what's been commented. So I definitely think it's possible, but I'm not aware of any scripts today that have the ability to go read the commenting pieces of your measure and pull those out yet.
Well, I say this now, but I'm probably going to do it, but I don't have 5 hours today to learn C script to do that. But I'm really interested.
Hey, there's a couple people
added into the comment section.
I'm going to throw it,
put them in there.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm going to challenge the community. We actually have a really robust tabular editor scripts GitHub repo. So there's a lot of people who are contributing. So those of you some of you on the podcast, I can know some of you by name who are listening here. thank you
Right.
very much for contributing to that. But Tommy is doing what we'll call it maybe an altar call here. Altar call to Dax Measure helping. Can we get anyone to come help us figure out, can we rip out comments out of a scripted Dax Measure and finding, pulling that out with a C# script inside the Tabular editor engine? So my answer, I think, is yes, but I've
And then
never
add
seen it
that to
done.
the description.
Yeah, and or I've seen there is a Tabular editor script out there now that lets you take the formula of the measure and automatically add it to the description. So you can do that part already. So if your formula is whatever it is, you can just add that as the description of the measure.
Yeah.
Anyways, oh, Tommy's already got it out there. Thank you, Tommy.
I'm really hoping someone suggests something, because
Tommy needs this right away.
Yeah, and I would say the other thing, again, think of that really a touch for the author or other authors is, I hope everyone's grouping their DAX queries into like organized queries. So if you have different sources or different base loads, again, the ability to, if I'm looking at this report for the first time, I want to
grouping your DAX queries.
Yeah, like put them in folders.
Oh, just put measures in folders.
I mean, Power Query, M queries.
Okay, that's where I thought you were going with it, because there's two places where folders can be used. I think one recommendation is put measures in folders to begin with. And then in the Power Query engine, when you're in the query editor, also group things by folders. And I love that technique. I do this a lot as well. I didn't think of that one, but that's another really good one. And I group things by where the data is coming from. So if it's like a SQL Server connection, or it's parameters, or it's user enter data,
my dim tables.
Yep. If I have dimension tables, I'll make like a folder for all the dimensions, so I can go to what am I looking for? I know right where to go. And the folder structure, I mean, when you have 5 tables, maybe not as important. When you have 50 tables, way more important.
Yeah. And so, and then the very last thing is in the model view, to be able to put different tabs together of the different relationships. Again, think about not just the user experience from a final touch, but the author experience. If I want to backtrack to say, how are you relating everything? If you have a really complex model, how can I say, you got this measure, it's coming from these 2 tables. Okay, I can go to the model tab. I can see, here's my here's my SharePoint data sources. Okay, let me see what the relationship is. Let me go to the data, and then I can basically draw the line between that and the actual DAX query.
Yep, I like that too.
And make it legible. So, yeah.
Let me ask you a question on that one, and then maybe this is what you were saying. In the model view, you have the ability of making multiple tabs.
That's what I mean.
Okay, so
multiple tabs.
So multiple tabs to make model. Okay. I would say I don't use that as much as I probably should. I usually do that when I'm teaching someone about the model. I'll make like, hey, let's look at this fact table. I'll bring in the fact table, the one fact table, and then I'll say, find all related tables. And it will add all the related tables for that one fact table. Because we do have the ability of making, let's call it like a hybrid star schema. It's still star schema, but we have 2 fact tables and multiple dimensions in touching each fact table. So sometimes it makes sense to say, well, one fact table is for a series of reports. Let's just focus on that. One thing I like to do, and I pretty much do this on most of my reports, I like organizing the model view in general. I don't like walking over to it and there's just lines and random crap everywhere. So another one that I do in the model view is I put all the dimensions on left and right side of the screen, and I put all my fact tables at the bottom of the screen. And this makes all of the dimensions have the lines go from the dimension, makes one 90-degree turn, and goes straight down to the fact table. So I will make, it's a little bit maybe wasteful on space, but from a clarity standpoint on the page, I feel it's really clear to see these are the dimensions, and this is how the filter direction is happening, because I can't tell you how many times people come like, I added this field to the report and it's nothing's changing. That's because someone didn't hide the right. Oh, that's another one I'll add there too. Hiding fields that like dimensions and keys. Hiding fields that you don't want users to build onto is really another good one too.
Can I make a recommendation? Because I think the vast majority of this conversation was focused towards external users.
That's true.
I know we did do a BI process in episode 12. But it sounds like maybe I'd like to take this conversation further, but I like focused on like what are the final touches of making sure your report author experience is the best for
That's
somebody
true.
else who picks
I
up,
agree.
or the
Oh,
next time
that's
you
true
pick up.
too.
Because I think we're running up on an hour. We could probably talk about like this next level stuff
That's
for
true.
the next 30,
I
40
just got
minutes.
sparked again. Yeah.
So why don't
you're
we
right.
table that for a next conversation?
I like that.
I appreciate that because I was beginning to run with that. So
So I guess the topic there would be kind of like working on reports in a team, right? How do you
Right.
polish the report for the next person to consume it?
man, I just shared all my
Yeah.
good nuggets too. So
Oh no, you got
we'll
you got to build
now
new
we can
nuggets.
reference this one. Be like, hey, at the end
Yeah.
of this conversation, we started talking about.
Yes,
well,
exactly.
on the podcast, I'm just going to trim this part out. So
There you go.
Exactly. Cut it out. Awesome. Well, that we are basically at time at this point. So thank you all for listening. We appreciate it. The YouTube chat has been very lively. Thank you all for kind of participating. There's a lot of good links that have been coming out. We appreciate you guys. Our only ask for you, the listener, is please just share these podcasts with somebody else. So if you find value from this, if you got a laugh, you enjoyed it, tell a coworker, tell one other person, hey, this was a fun podcast. It was engaging content. We liked it. So for those of you who stuck around for the full hour, clearly you were enjoying it to some degree at some level. So please just feel free to share that with somebody else. We appreciate you, and thank you very much for your listening time. And if you're listening to this late at night, good night. Tommy, where can you find the podcast?
So if you're listening to it right now on one of the podcast platforms, leave a review. It would be huge. But you can also join the conversation live on YouTube and LinkedIn every Tuesday and Thursday morning, 7:30 a.m. Central. Just follow the Power BI Chips channel. If you're watching live and you want to listen again, you want to do it on a jog or as you go to sleep, you can actually subscribe to the podcast on Apple and Spotify.
Yeah.
Mike, you didn't mention we may or may not be live next week in Houston.
Yeah, so next week we
just
are
a little PSA, yeah,
PSA announcement. So Tommy and I are going down to the Houston Dynamics Communities Power BI Summit event. So we'll be there. If you're attending the event, if you're going to be there, find Tommy and I or hit us up on LinkedIn, send us a message. I've already got people kind of saying, "Hey, I'm going to be there. I want to sit down and have a beer." So you get free consulting for a beer from Mike when you're down in Houston. So I feel like I should have a shirt that says "We'll consult for beers." So, anyways, for those of you who are down there, we would love to chat and hang out with the community. That's why we do these kind of things. It's super fun and interesting to us. So catch us there. But with that, we're going to try streaming this from a Airbnb, and this may or may not work very well next week. So I might have to have just a standby screen up, and we might just have an audio only, no videos showing on the podcast. So we'll check it out. We're going to try and do a little testing maybe, and then hopefully we'll be live next week. If not, we'll figure something else out. So we'll kind of wing it. So bear with us while we figure out this traveling thing, which we haven't done in over, a year and a half, almost 2 years now. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Just starting to move around is very refreshing. I totally enjoy that. Anyways, with that, thank you all very much. I appreciate your time. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.